I stayed in a tent there. But I stayed out here for 7 years. Now I'm in a place that's called ODAC. It's one day at a time. It's a shelter. It's nothing really in there that's being proud of to be in there, because they really don't help you as much as they can, but they try to help get housing for you if it's possible, and you're able to get it.
Heat. In some American cities, you can feel opportunity in the air: new jobs, new buildings, new money. But in the same streets where life is supposed to move forward, you can also find pockets of suffering so intense they make people look away. Not because they don't see it, but because they don't know what to do with what they're seeing. A tent on a sidewalk isn't just a tent. It can be a final line of defense against weather, violence, illness, and total isolation. A bridge underpass isn't just concrete. For someone with nowhere else to go, it can be the closest thing to a roof. And in the past few years, a new danger has tightened around these streets: fentanyl, a highly potent synthetic opioid that has intensified the overdose crisis in many communities, especially among people living outside with limited access to health care and treatment. Stay with me. This episode is not graphic. We will not show or describe anything in a sensational way. We will not give instructions for drug use, wrongdoing, or anything harmful. We are here to document reality with dignity, because behind every headline is a human being. And behind every bad area is a system that failed long before a tent ever appeared. This is Homeless US News, where we bring you the stories that so often remain unheard. Today, we're mapping 10 of America's most high-risk homelessness hotspots, places where encampments have grown dense, services are overwhelmed, and people face harsh conditions shaped by poverty, crime, neglect, and addiction. Not to shame these places, not to stigmatize the people living there, but to understand what creates these environments and what it would actually take to change them. Because if we can't face the hardest streets, we can't fix what's breaking our cities. Part 1. WHY hotspots form when poverty becomes a trap. Before we name any street or neighborhood, we need to answer one question: why do these hotspots form at all? Because homelessness does not spread randomly. It clusters where the system leaves gaps and where survival becomes possible, even if barely. One of the strongest forces behind a hotspot is density. When a city has too few shelter beds, too few affordable apartments, and too few long-term housing placements, people don't disappear. They concentrate near what they need to survive: food lines, clinics, transit routes, public restrooms, social services, and outreach teams. Even a small resource hub can become a magnet, because if you're living outside, distance is expensive. Every mile costs time, energy, safety, and sometimes your belongings. Then there are living conditions. Hotspots often form where sanitation support is limited, where trash removal is inconsistent, where clean water is hard to access, where extreme heat or cold punishes the body, and where public space becomes the only option left. When those conditions collide with a large number of people living outside, daily life becomes a constant struggle, not just for comfort, but for basic health. The next factor is crime and safety. It's important to say this carefully. People experiencing homelessness are frequently victims of violence and exploitation, not just causes of disorder, but in areas where desperation concentrates, where street-level trafficking and theft become more common, and where people have to protect themselves without the safety of a locked door. The environment can become extremely dangerous, not only for residents and businesses nearby, but for the unhoused people who have no ability to leave. And then there's the factor that has changed the landscape in many cities: the overdose crisis, with fentanyl playing a major role. When a powerful drug spreads through vulnerable communities, the result isn't just individual tragedy. It becomes a public health emergency. Overdoses rise, medical emergencies become routine, and the stress on outreach teams, hospitals, and families grows heavier. Finally, there's the factor we don't talk about enough: the social impact of invisibility. Hotspots exist partly because they can, because society becomes accustomed to suffering in certain zones, because people learn which neighborhoods don't matter, Because entire blocks are treated like they're supposed to absorb the pain of a city that doesn't want to see it. So when we say dangerous hotspot, we are not talking about a single cause. We're talking about a web: unaffordable housing, low wages, untreated mental illness trauma, limited healthcare access, strange shelters, uneven policing, and a public that wants the problem moved more than solved. Now, we're going to walk through 10 places where this web has tightened into something visible. As we do, remember, we are not ranking human suffering like a contest. We're highlighting 10 locations that have become symbols of how extreme the crisis can get when systems fail at scale. Part 2. California's contrast: wealth on top, survival below. California holds some of the greatest wealth in the world and some of the most visible street homelessness in America. When housing costs soar faster than wages and when affordable units disappear, the street becomes the overflow. Hotspot 10. Venice Beach, Los Angeles. Tourism meets displacement. Venice Beach is known globally for sun, art, and ocean air. But along the edges of that image, homelessness has been painfully visible since RVS, and people trying to live in one of the most expensive regions on Earth. In places like Venice, the danger isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the constant pressure of displacement. Cleanup operations move people along, but they don't move people into housing. A person can lose documents, medication, and the fragile stability they built in a certain spot. And when someone is forced to relocate again and again, it becomes harder to keep appointments, harder to stay connected to outreach, and harder to believe help is real. Venice also shows something that makes many Americans uncomfortable. Homelessness doesn't only belong to faraway areas. It can sit beside multi-million-dollar homes. It can live inside a tourist postcard. It can exist in the same frame as luxury. And that contrast creates anger, sometimes directed at the wrong target. The people living outside in Venice are not a tourist attraction. They are a symptom of a housing market that has become unreachable for countless workers, seniors, and families. Hotspot 9. Skid Row, Los Angeles, a city within a city. Skid Row is one of the most well-known homelessness districts in America. It has been shaped by decades of policy choices, concentrated poverty, and the way services were historically centralized in a small area. Skid Row is often described in extremes, but the reality is simpler and more devastating. Thousands of people living in a concentrated zone, many with serious health needs, many with trauma histories, many trying to survive day to day in public space. When a place reaches that density, everything becomes harder. Outreach teams can't keep up. Shelter beds can't meet demand. Behavioral health systems get overwhelmed. Public space becomes crowded with human life that should be behind doors, on beds, with privacy and safety. And then the street economy grows, not because people want it to, but because desperation creates opportunity for exploitation. Where the system collapses, informal systems take over, some helpful, some harmful, many unpredictable. Skid Row isn't just a bad neighborhood. It's a warning sign of what happens when housing becomes impossible and services are permanently under-resourced. Hotspot 8. The Tenderloin, San Francisco. The overdose crisis in the shadow of tech wealth. San Francisco's Tenderloin sits in one of the most expensive cities in the country, surrounded by enormous economic power. And yet, it has struggled for years with concentrated poverty, open-air drug activity, and visible street homelessness. The danger here is shaped by density and instability. When many people live outside in a small area, public health risks rise. When addiction spreads through a concentrated community, overdoses increase. When mental health care is difficult to access consistently, more people cycle between crisis and the street. The Tenderloin also reveals a hard truth. A city can be progressive in language and still fail in capacity. Compassion without infrastructure is not enough. If a person can't access stable housing and consistent treatment, slogans don't save lives. In these California hotspots, the question is not whether the cities care. The question is whether the system is built to match the scale of what's happening. And in too many cases, it is not. Part 3. The Pacific Northwest, when ideals collide with reality. The Pacific Northwest is often associated with innovation, compassion, and progressive values, but homelessness has expanded here too, fueled by housing shortages, rising costs, and behavioral health systems that can't meet demand. Hotspot 7, downtown Seattle. Encampments under the rain. Seattle's downtown and surrounding areas have seen recurring encampments in parks, underpasses, and along major corridors. When rain is constant, staying dry becomes a daily battle. When temperatures drop, exposure becomes dangerous. And when shelter options are limited or feel unsafe, people remain outside. Seattle's crisis is often discussed as a political fight: sweeps versus tolerance, enforcement versus compassion. But for the person living on the sidewalk, the debate is irrelevant. Their reality is simpler. They need a place to sleep that won't get taken away, a place to stay warm, a way to access health care, and a path back to stable housing. Like many cities, Seattle has tried a mix of approaches, including tiny home villages and enhanced outreach. These efforts can help some people, but the need is often larger than the capacity. And when capacity falls short, the street becomes the default shelter system. Hotspot 6, downtown Portland, a city struggling to hold the line. Portland's homelessness crisis has been highly visible, especially in areas where encampments grew and public frustration intensified. The city has faced the same collisions seen elsewhere: rising housing costs, limited shelter capacity, mental health and addiction crises, and a public that wants quick change. In Portland, you can see the tension between values and outcomes. Many residents want compassionate solutions. Many also feel exhausted by disorder, safety concerns, and the sense that the city is stuck. But again, the core truth remains: you cannot sweep your way out of a housing shortage. You cannot wrest your way out of untreated mental illness. You cannot punish your way out of poverty. A hotspot forms when people are pushed out of housing faster than the system can catch them. And in Portland and Seattle, that catching system has been strained to the limit. Part 4. The Northeast, where history, density, and addiction collide. In the Northeast, homelessness often collides with extreme housing pressure, older infrastructure, and long-standing poverty in certain neighborhoods. And in some places, the overdose crisis has turned specific corridors into national symbols. Hotspot 5, Kensington, Philadelphia, a public health emergency in plain sight. Kensington has become one of the most talked about neighborhoods in America. When people discuss fentanyl and street addiction, it is often labeled with extreme terms, but what matters most is the human reality. People trapped in addiction, people living outside, people cycling through crisis while the surrounding community struggles with fear, grief, and exhaustion. In Kensington, the danger is not only crime, it's the constant presence of medical emergencies. It's the way addiction can turn time into a loop: wake up sick, search for relief, repeat. It's the way untreated trauma and mental illness can make recovery feel impossible without stable housing and consistent care. And it's also the way stigma blocks solutions. When the public only sees bad people instead of sick people, terrified people, exhausted people, and traumatized people, policies lean toward punishment instead of treatment. Kensington is not a spectacle. It is a mirror. It shows what happens when poverty, addiction, and systemic neglect intersect, and when help is fragmented, inconsistent, and overwhelmed. Hotspot 4, the Bowery, New York City, a symbol that never fully disappeared. The Bowery has a long history tied to homelessness and poverty in New York City. Even as neighborhoods change, the pressure of sky-high rents and overcrowded systems keeps pushing people into precarious situations. New York's shelter network is massive, but it is also under strain. And for some people, especially those with severe mental illness, trauma histories, or negative shelter experiences, the street can feel like the only place where they have control, even if it's dangerous. In areas like the Bowery, danger can rise after dark, not because every person is violent, but because public space at night is unpredictable, and people living outside have no barrier between themselves and harm. Hotspot 3, the South Bronx, New York City, poverty with nowhere to go. The South Bronx represents another side of New York's crisis: deep economic inequality. In areas with high poverty and limited resources, people can fall into homelessness through eviction, job loss, family breakdown, or untreated health crises. The danger here isn't only street violence. It's the combination of harsh weather, limited safe options, and the way poverty compresses choices. When a person has no money, no stable support network, and no access to consistent health care, the street becomes less of a choice and more of an outcome. And once someone is outside in a city with cold winters, the risks multiply fast. Exposure becomes a serious threat. Illness spreads. Mental health worsens. Recovery becomes harder. The Northeast hotspots reveal a painful truth. Even in cities with vast budgets and resources, the system can still fail to protect thousands of people from the street. Part 5. The Sun Belt and the Hidden Hotspots: Heat, Sprawl, and Limited Shelter. When people picture homelessness, they often picture coastal cities. But some of the most dangerous conditions emerge in places where heat is intense, distances are long, and shelters and services are harder to reach. Hotspot to Miami, Florida, under the overpasses. Miami's heat and humidity can be punishing, especially for people living outside. Encampments often form under overpasses and in hidden pockets where shade offers a small defense against the sun. But under an overpass, danger concentrates. Noise never stops. Sleep is shallow. The environment can be stressful and unsanitary when resources are limited. And when the overdose crisis touches these areas, emergencies can become frequent, especially when people are isolated from consistent care. Miami also reflects a broader pattern. Booming development and rising costs can push more people into unstable housing. If wages don't match rent, more residents become one crisis away from losing everything. And when that happens at scale, a city can grow richer while more people sleep outside. Hotspot 1, Albuquerque, New Mexico, the crisis outside the spotlight. Albuquerque does not always dominate national headlines, but it has struggled with homelessness and addiction challenges that mirror larger national trends. Encampments in parks, along corridors, and under overpasses can expose people to harsh weather, violence, and the risks of addiction without enough support. In mid-sized cities, the danger can be amplified by limited capacity, fewer shelter beds, fewer specialized treatment options, underfunded services, and long distances between resources. If you miss a ride, you miss your appointment. If your phone dies, you lose contact. If your documents are stolen, you fall off the map. Albuquerque is a reminder that this crisis is not only a big city problem, it is a nationwide issue, and it can become just as deadly in places where the public pays less attention. Now, we've named 10 hotspots, but the real question is not where they are. The real question is why they keep growing, and what we can do that actually works. Part 6: What IT will take. Real solutions, not just cleanups. If you've made it this far, you might be thinking, this is hopeless. It's not hopeless, but it is bigger than one program, one law, or one election cycle. First, we need to say the obvious truth out loud. Homelessness is primarily a housing problem. When rent outpaces wages, when affordable units disappear, when evictions rise, more people fall. And once they fall, getting back up is extremely difficult without stable housing as a foundation. That means the backbone solution is more affordable housing built at scale, preserved long-term, and protected from becoming unaffordable the moment the market rises again. It also means cities need housing pathways, not just temporary stops. Emergency shelter can save lives, especially in extreme weather. But without permanent placements, shelters become holding zones, and people cycle back to the street. Second, we need strong prevention because the cheapest, kindest solution is stopping homelessness before it starts. Emergency rental assistance, eviction prevention, mediation, and short-term support during medical crises or job loss can keep families housed. Too often, we wait until someone is already outside, then spend far more money managing the crisis. Third, we need healthcare and behavioral health systems that can actually meet demand. That includes mental health services, crisis response, and addiction treatment that is accessible and continuous. Not a maze, not a waitlist that lasts longer than a person's stability. And we need to be honest about fentanyl and the overdose crisis. People living outside are at higher risk because they have less protection, less consistent care, less safe space, less ability to recover in stability. A real response includes treatment access, outreach, and overdose prevention along with housing. Because housing and health are linked, you cannot separate them and expect people to heal. Fourth, we need street outreach that is funded like a serious public service. Outreach is not just handing out water or pamphlets. Done well, outreach builds trust, reconnects people to documentation, healthcare, and benefits, and guides them toward housing. But outreach teams cannot do that if they are overwhelmed, understaffed, and treated like an afterthought. Fifth, we need public policy that measures outcomes, not optics. Not how many tents did we clear, but how many people moved into stable housing and stayed housed. Not how quickly did we remove visible homelessness, but how many people avoided homelessness in the first place. Because you can sweep a street in one day, but you cannot sweep away human suffering without building the exits. And finally, we need a cultural shift. Dehumanization is gasoline on this fire. When society treats unhoused people as less than, the public becomes more willing to support punishment instead of solutions, more willing to fund enforcement instead of housing, more willing to accept suffering as normal. But every person living outside is a human being. Many had jobs, many had families, many had one crisis that knocked them down: an injury, a layoff, a rent increase, a mental health collapse, domestic violence, medical debt, a death in the family, or a slow chain of losses that no one saw coming. Homelessness is not a personality type. It is what happens when life becomes unaffordable and the safety net has holes. So what do we do with the 10 hotspots we just covered? We don't use them to shame cities. We use them as warnings, proof that when we delay solutions, the consequences become more visible, more dangerous, and more traumatic for everyone. Outro, don't let this become background noise. If you watched this video and felt fear, sadness, anger, or helplessness, that reaction is human. But here is the danger. The real danger is when we get used to it, when tents become scenery, when overdoses become just part of the city, when suffering becomes something we scroll past. Because once we normalize it, we stop demanding change. And when we stop demanding change, the crisis keeps spreading block by block, city by city, until more people are living outside than anyone thought possible. So here's your call to action, and it doesn't require perfection. It requires attention. Choose one local organization doing real work: street outreach, housing placement, mental health support, addiction recovery, medical care, or eviction prevention, and support them if you can. Volunteer, donate, share their resources. Learn what policies in your area expand affordable housing and prevention. Ask your city leaders what the measurable plan is, not to clean up, but to house people and keep them housed. And in your daily life, practice the smallest form of dignity that still changes everything. Refuse to dehumanize. Refuse to treat a person like a nuisance. Refuse to reduce someone to a tent, an addiction, or a bad moment. Because dignity is not a reward for success. Dignity is the ground people stand on while they rebuild. This is Homeless US News. If you want us to cover another city, another neighborhood, or another crisis you're seeing in your community, tell us in the comments. Share this video so these realities don't stay hidden. Subscribe if you want reporting that centers humanity, not stereotypes. And if you made it to the end, thank you for staying with the hard truth. Because the moment we truly see people, we can no longer pretend it's not happening. And that is where change begins.